What is up, guys? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. My name is Rob, and today it's a big one. It's my top 10 favorite films of 2014. Okay, so like I said, this is a big one. I've been pumping this for a while and really excited to put this together. Very, very hard to do. Probably harder to put together than it was my top 10 games of 2014 were the 10 best films that I saw this year. I mentioned this on some videos, throughout the year, that I actually feel like the film industry had a much better year than the gaming industry. There were a ton of great games, as evidenced by a lot of the videos and lists that I've made about gaming throughout the year. But really, it was much more consistent, and there were much more solid contenders for the 10 best films of the year throughout 2014, which is great. That's really, really exciting. There's always a lot of good films every year, but this was the first time in a while that I remembered struggling so hard to put together my 10 favorite films. So after much deliberation and one last-minute film edging itself right into the list in literally just the past couple of days, I finally felt comfortable with the 10 films that I picked, the order that I put them in. There's a couple of obvious choices. There's a couple of surprises, as there always should be in any good list. So I'm really excited to do this. I'm going to cut the bull, and I'm going to get right to the list and start here for you guys with number 10. And coming in at number 10 was a fantastic, wonderful surprise. It is the film John Wick, starring the one and only Keanu Reeves. Now, I was really excited about this film because of all the positive buzz and press it was getting. The IMAX presentation that we saw was absolutely fantastic. And what's great is this is kind of a return to form for Keanu Reeves. And he is somebody who I've always loved. After the Matrix films were done, there was a period throughout, the back half of the 2000s and last couple of years where people kind of made fun of him and felt like he wasn't really that powerful of an actor. And, the whole, whoa, I'm Keanu Reeves thing and I know Kung Fu. And stuff that is certainly funny, but even throughout that whole period, I was like, man, I love Keanu Reeves. I mean, the simple fact that he played Neo and he played Ted from Bill and Ted, and the character whose name I can't remember from the fantastic Point Break has always kept him as one of my favorite actors. I just think he's a wonderful guy. His film choices are great. Speed from the 90s was one of the best action movies of all time. And again, he was Neo. He was the one, and that is such a special thing. And I was really sad that people kind of had to make fun of him for a while, even if it was kind of warranted. And then here comes this film out of nowhere, John Wick, where he is one badass mofo, an unstoppable force. He shoots all the people in this movie. If you haven't seen it, you need to see it. It will pump your adrenaline like almost no other movie can. It is insane how badass he is, and you can tell he did a lot of his own stunts. He is in fantastic top form, fighting shape. Great to see him doing this. There's also some great acting moments where he really shows that he does still have the chops. Like I said, it's a beautifully shot movie, a wonderfully choreographed film. It reminds me, it kind of harkens back to the 90s John Woo days when he was doing a lot of Van Damme kind of flicks and just making great fisticuffs fighting, before it got really flashy with The Matrix, coincidentally. And I just think that it was really cool to see this, man. He's just in top form here, and it was really great to see it. So this was a film that I saw with a bunch of my bros. It was a dude's night. 5 or 6 of us got together, went to see this film in IMAX. We all loved it. It's the kind of film that you watch and you routinely will go, oh, every time something completely brutal happens. And literally, he kills almost the entire population of the country in this film. It's so great to see him be such a badass, and he's a good guy badass, so that helps too. Also, last thing, they have a really unique kind of world building aspect going on in this film, with this hotel kind of underworld of assassins and hitmen called the Continental, and there's really cool things going on there. So anyone who's seen it knows what I'm talking about. If you haven't seen it, it's one of the things that I want you to pay attention to when you do see it, because I think that there's potential for a larger on-film universe within this world to do a lot of different stories, perhaps centering around a lot of different people. So, I don't know, that's one of the cool things about it. Anyway, those are my feelings. If you haven't seen it, do yourself a favor, see this wonderful action movie. John Wick was my 10th favorite film of 2014. Coming in at number 9 is a film that I was expecting to place much, much higher on this list going into the year. But, the fact that it still makes this list shows that it still is an excellent, excellent movie and one of the best films of this year. And that is going to be Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Now, I love Christopher Nolan. He is a true visionary filmmaker. I think he's all but perfect. A lot of people find flaws with some of his stuff, and I think that people only dig so deep because his films are so good, so meticulously put together, and so well crafted that people want to go out of their way to find flaws with what seems otherwise perfect. And of course, a lot of the flaws people find are real. He's still any one man, and he's going to make, the occasional weird plot hole mistake or whatever. None of that stuff matters. When you look at the Dark Knight trilogy and you look at Inception, and you look at, oh my gosh, what is the Prestige? Holy shit, I can't believe I almost forgot that. Everything else he's done, I mean, he's just fantastic. I think he's one of the best filmmakers out there. Interstellar was really exciting because we knew that he was taking his very cerebral type of storytelling and filmmaking into space with using true to life to today's science theoretical physics that they definitely adapted into a science fiction tale set in the near future where the world is dying because the dirt isn't producing food, and so the animals are dying and the crops are dying and people are dying, and it's a very scary time. And how do we save humanity? Well, obviously we have to move off of planet Earth. And I think that is a real world problem that we may see face the human race in the next 100 to 200 years. I mean, who knows? I think that something to that effect could happen. It's a very scary possible reality. And he takes it into this mind-bending kind of twisty tale with traveling through wormholes and black holes and what's going on with, playing with the flow of time being the fourth dimension and a lot of really cool things. The movie spends a long time in the beginning setting up Matthew McConaughey's character in relationship to his daughter. It seems long-winded, but it accomplishes a couple of things by setting up Michael Caine's character, setting up Anne Hathaway's character, why it is that Matthew McConaughey's character is the one asked to go into space to conduct this 4-man mission, what had previously happened, what's going on with Earth, why are crops dying, why are people afraid, and worried about the fate of the human race. All these things are wrapped up in this first 30, 40 minutes of the film. By the time you finally get to space, that's when things get really nutty and really kooky. I love what happens. I don't want to spoil it. It's a beautifully shot movie. Another film you need to see, or it's probably too late, but you should have seen in IMAX. The IMAX shots, when they come into these huge epic scale kind of shots of what's going on in space and on these different planets, man, it is gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. And Wally Pfister, I don't believe, shot this film, which is very rare for Christopher Nolan. I forgot to look up who did, but I'm all but sure it wasn't Wally Pfister because he was working on Transcendence at the time. So it's just a great film. And the way it all came together with, of course, the shocking twist finale, the surprise ending, I thought it was great. I watched it with awe. I loved seeing what they did with the idea. Jessica Chastain's character, I love her as an actress, and she was great as her performance, but her character drove me up a frickin' wall. But I think she was kind of meant to. So long story short, great movie, beautifully shot movie, one of the most cerebral, twisty sort of tales I've ever seen. And the ending was awesome. It delivered on everything I wanted it to. So, true to form, Christopher Nolan knocks another one out of the park. Interstellar was my 9th favorite film of 2014. Okay, coming in at number 8 is a film that I'm sure a lot of you have been waiting for me to talk about and excited to see where it will place on this list. That is the one and only Guardians of the Galaxy, the most recent entry in Marvel's Cinematic Universe, leading into the Avengers Age of Ultron in May next year, and Phase 3 and beyond, and all these different things. What can you say about Guardians of the Galaxy that hasn't already been said? It's freaking amazing. It's the second best comic book film of the year, but it's definitely one of the best I've ever seen. I would probably place it in my top 10 comic book films of all time, for sure. It's great. Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana knock it out of the park. Bradley Cooper was great as Rocket. And let me tell you about Dave Bautista playing Drax. Holy shit. He was the surprise to me. He was the character I fell in love with more than almost anybody because he has this really awkward, dry sense of humor and the whole, nothing flies over my head. My reflexes are too fast. I would catch it. That shit is gold. It is comedy gold and writing gold, and he delivers it so perfectly, and he's a wrestler. It's insane how good he did for this film, not to mention the entire ensemble cast. Now, a lot of people said, and I think that just because they're riding the recent hype of the film, a lot of people have said that they find it to be a better film than The Avengers, which is the easy comparison because it's a bunch of Marvel superheroes together on a team, and that's what The Avengers is, and that's what Guardians is. Now, Guardians is phenomenal. Here I am placing it at number 8 and telling you it's one of my favorite comic book films of all time. But I don't think it compares to The Avengers at all. Everything that happened with The Avengers was far too exciting and exhilarating. The kind of thing that we never saw we could see on screen, and it happened better than we could have imagined. The Avengers holds a very special place in the history of comic book film. And although Guardians of the Galaxy is amazing and all but perfect, I just don't think it compares to the Avengers. But that's just my personal taste, you know? I mean, they're both excellent, so there's no real wrong answer there. But yeah, I don't know. James Gunn knocked it out of the park. You know, I became a big fan of his after he directed Lollipop Chainsaw, the video game from 2012, I believe. Alongside Suda51. I just think he's a great guy. He's perfect for this universe for Guardians. He's perfect for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We know he's hard at work on Guardians of the Galaxy 2. Can't wait to see what happens with that film. So there's a lot of great things happening there. And like I said, there's nothing else to be said. It's Guardians of the Galaxy, and it's freaking awesome. Okay, and coming in at number 7 is one of the first big surprises, I think, of this list for me, and that is going to be The Signal, which is the kind of found footage style shot sci-fi tale about some sort of weird signal that a couple of young college students come across while on a road trip and get wrapped up in this crazy, mysterious order of events. It's a film directed by someone I'd never previously heard of, William Eubank. It stars Brendan Thwaites, who a few of you might recognize from a couple other films. And I gotta tell you, he was one of the biggest surprises. I thought that he knocked this role out of the park. A very unique story where he's been going through rehab from a recent accident where he can't really walk right. He's got this serious girlfriend. Him and his best friend and his girlfriend are on a road trip to take her to her new school. And like I said, through, some weird hacking events of their computers and the fact that these two guys are very kind of tech savvy when it comes to this sort of thing, they get involved in this chase to find this guy who's hacking them. And they come across this weird signal. And like I said, they get involved in this unbelievable mystery that I can't really talk about too much because it would spoil the film. Needless to say, Lawrence Fishburne is involved. He's great as always. You're really so immersed into these kids' plight, and mostly Brendan Thwaites' character's plight, of what's going on. Where's his girlfriend? Where's his best friend? What the hell is going on? How does he get out of this facility? Once they do get out of the facility, what's going on? How do they escape? Why is everybody acting so weird? And to me, it culminated in an absolutely mind-blowing conclusion. Probably my favorite ending to a film this year, except for maybe my number 1 and my number 2. But regardless, this is a film that certainly doesn't click with everybody. Some people thought it was really good. Some people didn't like it. And a lot of people find it to be just middle of the road. I don't know how to explain it. It just spoke to me. It was an absolute wonderful surprise. I went in with just okay expectations. I knew I wanted to see it because it was this weird sci-fi alien twisty kind of story, and I love that stuff. So I definitely was like, we need to see this film. And if I remember correctly, I think we saw this on the 4th of July. And it just blew me away. I can't talk about it too much more than that, but if you've heard of it and have yet to see it, trust me, please listen to me. I beg you to go out of your way and see this film. It's readily available on DVD and Blu-ray. It's a wonderful 2 hours of your time well spent. Please see it. I would love to hear what you people think of it. I just thought it was a great, excellent film. One of the best sci-fi films in a long time. So The Signal was my surprise 7th favorite film of 2014. Okay, coming in at number 6 is a film I'm really excited to talk about. Coming from a man who needs no introduction, a film I knew was going to be skyrocketing to the top of my list going into this year and coming into this movie. That is The Grand Budapest Hotel by the one and only Wes Anderson, absolutely one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. Now, his films are so specific and so dry, witty, and clever in the delivery of their humor and their very weird worlds and kooky characters that they definitely don't work for everybody. And I get that. That is completely okay. But his films are so special to me. He has never had a misstep, I don't think. Even his worst films, which he doesn't have any bad ones, but even his worst are still excellent. And The Grand Budapest is right up there with the very, very top of his best films. To me, it sits right alongside Moonrise Kingdom and Royal Tenenbaums and The Life Aquatic. It is such a great film, an unbelievable ensemble cast. This is probably the darkest film he's ever made. And I don't mean dark as in the humor, because I think The Royal Tenenbaums probably takes that prize from Wes Anderson films. That's very dark as far as how its jokes and humor are delivered. But this film is also dark just in its story, its tone, the pace of the film, and some of the events that happen. It's also easily his most emotional. There's a lot of heart and caring and love that is being told throughout this story, something not as typical in his films. There are elements of those sprinkled throughout his other films, but here it's front and center. You're focusing on the relationship between a bellhop for the Grand Budapest Hotel and the bellhop's kind of, prodigy, his young helper, which is a young boy, and the crazy relationship that they have as they get involved with an unbelievable twisty turn of events. And it's hard to explain. There's a will that's being read from somebody who the bellhop was having a relationship with. She dies. Everyone's fighting over the money. It turns out everything is going to him. All these other family members are completely angry. They're getting mad. This is happening amongst the backdrop, set against the backdrop of World War II. And there's just a lot of crazy things. Amazing set design, beautiful tone and visuals, and art direction, typical of Wes Anderson's films. And Ralph Fiennes just knocked it out of the park. This is the best role I've ever seen him in, for sure. I don't care what anyone says. This is the best I've ever seen him. And I really hope the film and the actors and the screenplay get nominated, because Wes Anderson's been snubbed far too many times at the Oscars. And I think that he should have won for Moonrise Kingdom. But since that didn't happen, I'm going to hope that Grand Budapest Hotel gets some serious recognition, because it's one of his best films, and it's easily one of the best films I saw this year. Okay, cracking into the top 5, and at number 5 is Edge of Tomorrow, starring Tom Cruise. Another wonderful and surprisingly amazing, kick-ass sci-fi film for the year. Tom Cruise is always amazing in roles like this. He is the premier action star. I have a soft spot for Tom Cruise, and anyone who knows me knows this, because I freaking love Tom Cruise. I don't care if he went crazy 10 years ago. None of that shit means anything to me. He's an amazingly charismatic actor. And he's a lot of fun to watch. He works really hard, very involved, very hands-on with every film he does. He's just a really wonderful guy. Edge of Tomorrow is unique in that it's actually a Japanese novel adaptation, the Japanese original novel. I think it's even a graphic novel. It's called All You Need Is Kill. I've never read it. A friend of mine owns it and has read it and said it was great, and he also loved Edge of Tomorrow. It's a very unique kind of American big-budget Hollywood twist on this tale. And, a lot of people saw it. It didn't do quite as well as it should have. It had great reviews and a lot of positive buzz, and it ended up doing okay. I think it only grossed around 110 million domestically, which it should have done a lot more. But everyone still knows that it's a great movie, and I think that matters just as much. So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's like the sci-fi equivalent to Groundhog Day, where he keeps reliving the same alien invasion, over and over again, and he has to adapt to what's happening and learn how to defeat the aliens, try to recruit people to his side by showing that he has been living the same day over and over again. And they use a lot of great scenarios to sort of showcase that he knows what's going to happen before anyone else does. And that stuff is really fun. I mean, you can watch that all day long and never get sick of it. Bill Paxton has an amazing role as his commanding officer. He's a lot of fun to watch, and he's classic. It's Bill Paxton. I mean, what are you going to do there? Emily Blunt, hot as always, absolutely fantastic as an action star. Her and Tom Cruise have an amazing chemistry on screen, and they deliver one of the best action films in a long time. It's kind of too bad it's not a brand new idea. It's not something that wasn't previously adapted, because that's so common nowadays. But even though it isn't, a fresh-faced idea, it's still an amazing film and a wonderful story. And Tom Cruise is always a ship, and Edge of Tomorrow is one of the best sci-fi films in a long time. So if you haven't seen it, I don't know what the hell you're doing, because you should get out there and watch it right now. Okay, so at number 4 comes the film that I mentioned early on in my intro before I started the list, of the last-minute film that I just saw over the holiday, now I think maybe 4 days ago, and just barely edged onto this list, because it's a miracle I even saw this movie before the end of the year. It's a surprise. It's a smaller film, very independent. You may or may not know of it. That film is Whiplash. Whiplash is basically a two-person film starring J.K. Simmons and Miles Teller. J.K. Simmons is just one of my favorite actors of all time. I'm sure you know him. You would most probably recognize him as playing J. Jonah Jameson in the original Spider-Man trilogy. A really funny, kooky, charismatic kind of actor. Miles Teller would probably be recognized most recently from Divergent, where he played kind of one of the students that Triss has to deal with in that whole story, and a couple other, I think, young adult films that I wouldn't be too familiar with. I thought he was fine in Divergent, and Divergent was a film I actually kind of liked quite a bit. And here, he does an amazing job. Now, Whiplash, if you haven't heard of it, it's kind of hard to explain and kind of simple to explain. It's, like I said, it's a two-person film. Miles Teller is playing a music student. He's a drummer. And yes, you probably know I am also a professional drummer, and that does sort of aid in why I appreciate this story, but it is definitely not a movie that you need to be a drummer or a musician to understand. I promise you that. So that doesn't really have too much of an influence. So he plays a drummer, and he's very dedicated and so driven to want to be the best and to get better and better. And he's already a music student at a music school. And I almost said J. Jonah Jameson. J.K. Simmons plays, the top tier music instructor for the school that he's attending. And he is a real hard ass. And I can't spoil too much more, but they have an amazing dichotomy and a back and forth relationship that is unbelievable to watch unfold. It's incredibly uncomfortable for most of the movie. There's a lot of swearing. There's a lot of yelling and screaming. This is a movie that I saw by myself because my girlfriend watched the trailer and was like, I can't watch that much yelling. And I totally understand what she's saying. But it's just one of the most amazing two-person performances I've ever seen. The music is phenomenal, so I do have to comment on that. The title of the film, Whiplash, is actually named after a piece of music that they work on consistently throughout the film. There's a couple live performances. From what I understand, Miles Teller actually is one hell of a drummer and does a lot of the drumming in the film. But there was an actual professional jazz and big band drummer who did actually do a lot of the really difficult, complicated stuff. I don't know that person's name, and I wish I looked him up. But, needless to say, whether it's Miles Teller just killing it or this other guy, the music, the drum performances, everybody, it's a wonderful, wonderful film. And it's so great to see all these great pieces of music performed. And there's an interesting analogy I have for the film that only people who've seen it will understand. But I kind of feel like the purpose of the film is meant to sort of emulate a drum solo. It's almost a 2-hour drum solo thematically. The way it starts out very slow and simple, and it builds and builds. It gets more and more complicated until it crescendos, and then it brings itself back down for one final, just, for the sort of oomph moment. It's amazing. It's so great. Absolutely wonderful film. I just don't even know how else to rave about this film. Like I said, you don't have to be a musician and you do not have to be a drummer to love it or understand it. I promise you that. It probably aided in my love of it a little bit, but you need to remember this fact. You don't have to be a drummer to appreciate this movie. I can't recommend it enough. You need to see Whiplash. Okay, we're closing in on the end here, and coming in at number 3 was another very huge surprise for me, and that is going to be Gone Girl. This is, to me, David Fincher's unsung masterpiece of a film. And yes, I think I probably like this even more than the infamous Fight Club, Social Network, which I thought was amazing, Seven, which is an unbelievable classic. He's made some of the best films of all time. But something about Gone Girl really spoke to me and really surprised me. I was more engrossed with this than most movies I can think of over the last several years. It's just this really, really amazing mystery involving a husband and a wife, and they have kind of a famous relationship, and then she goes missing, and who's to blame? Everyone starts targeting the husband, of course played by Ben Affleck, the wife played by Rosamund Pike, who I don't typically like. I don't really dislike her, but I also don't really like her. However, this movie and this role is something special. And there is an unbelievable twist and mystery happening with this film. And of course, I can go nowhere near it when talking about it for this video. But it's just probably the sharpest writing I've seen in a long time. Absolutely phenomenal directing, amazing cinematography, wonderful performances, and it just keeps going and going, and it's relentless. It hits you with amazing moment after amazing moment, and the whole time you're like, what the hell is going on? And then once you kind of know what's going on, you're like, what the hell is going to happen? How will this movie end? That's what you will say for the last half of this film. How can this possibly end? Who is going to come out okay and who is not going to come out okay? And there's a lot of people involved. Don't get me wrong. There's more than just the husband and wife sort of involved in this tale. But it's this crazy murder mystery, and unraveling the plot and the twists at hand is probably the most fun I've had in a movie theater in a long time, and one of the most tense experiences I've almost ever had watching a movie, period. So, like I said, it's definitely a big surprise for me, but it really is that good. Gone Girl was my third favorite, biggest surprise of 2014. Okay, and we're wrapping up here. We're coming into the top 2 films for the year. 2 films that really weren't a surprise for me. And so I'm going to get right to number 2. It's the film that, until a week ago, was hands down my favorite film of the year, but I kind of knew that it was going to get supplanted by the number 1 film. I don't want to get into that now. I'm going to tell you what my second favorite film of the year was. It is unquestionably XMen: Days of Future Past. Wow. Just wow. I don't know what to say about this film. This has become unquestionably, personally for me, my favorite comic book film of all time. I've been a huge fan of the X-Men films, the X-Men comics, the X-Men TV show from the 90s, ever since I discovered this universe as a kid. The X-Men films were really pioneers in today's comic book film world. And a lot of people kind of forget that. The first X-Men film in 2000 is really what kind of spearheaded the movement to comic book adaptation on film that led to what we have today. Some people argue for like Tim Burton's Batman and stuff, which is an amazing movie. I absolutely love that film. But that was so far removed from when X-Men came out. And it also really doesn't lend to anything happen in today's comic book world. X-Men started kind of building these larger universes and these huge adaptations on film in a different way that made it feel very relatable and palpable to the comic book reading audience and to the average movie-going audience. And slowly but surely, it began planting seeds that led to what Marvel started doing with Iron Man and now the Avengers stuff and the MCU. And also, of course, Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film, which happened in just 2002. Then you have X-Men 2 and Spider-Man 2, which respectively are two of my absolute top 5 favorite comic book films of all time. So, you kind of look at how I look at the X-Men 2 film and those first X-Men movies, and you relate it to what happened with the Wolverine just last year and now with Days of Future Past this year. Also in First Class the year before it. I mean, X-Men First Class was something really, really special, an amazing reboot. And they took a very famous X-Men storyline from the 1970s and gave it a small twist and made that not only work for the X-Men First Class rebooted universe, but they also used it to combine it with the previously established universe. So as long as Hugh Jackman is playing Wolverine, I've said this many times, all is right with the world. So the fact that we didn't have to usher in someone new playing Logan in the First Class universe. They found a way to make it work with the old films. And the fact that we get Patrick Stewart's Professor X, Ian McKellen's Magneto, and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, all in the same film with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender and Jennifer Lawrence. Just goddamn, it was so good. It was so emotional. There is a weight and a gravitas and an emotional investment happening in this film that not one single comic book film has come anywhere close to having. Some of them have done great jobs, and I love a lot of the best comic book films, make no mistake. But this is the only comic book film that I personally hold higher than The Dark Knight. This is a masterpiece, an absolutely wonderful tale. So many things going on, so many pieces to pull together. Two completely separate, established X-Men film universes have been made into one cohesively, and it works. It also kind of, in a weird way, I've talked about this a couple times with my friends too, it sort of erases some of the past mistakes from the films like X-Men 3 and the first Wolverine film, but it also oddly legitimizes them. Like the Wolverine from last year kind of put that sort of practice in place and started to make some of that stuff like legitimate within the film universe. And this just straight up, slam dunked it, knocked it out of the park, solidified that idea. So that what's great is that those films that have previously been sort of widely accepted as sort of blunders or missteps in the on-film X-Men universe, and even though I don't hate those movies, I don't like them either, so I definitely will agree with that. What's great is that now, if you want to experience the full breadth of the X-Men universe on film, you have to watch those films, and everything that happens in them counts, and it matters. And that's a pretty hard feat to achieve, and I got to give Bryan Singer credit. He's the mastermind of the entire comic book film universe that we are all watching unfold today, even the MCU stuff. It is because of what Bryan Singer first did in 2000 with X-Men that we have the amazing Avengers films and everything going on right now today. So we owe him a lot of credit, and he comes back full circle and delivers, again, what I feel is the best comic book film of all time. There's other ones that are of contention, and a couple of them that I can't talk about till after I finish this list when I mention my honorable mentions. But, I mean, I don't even know what else there is to say. I knew I was going to love this film because I have a special place in my heart for the X-Men movies, but it far surpassed my expectations. No comic book film has a right to be as good as I thought Days of Future Past was. It is, and was, the absolute second best film of 2014. Okay, that's enough ranting and raving and hooting and hollering about X-Men, and how much I love that film, and how much it was almost the number one movie of the year. However, what film actually gets that honor is probably not going to be a surprise, at least if you know me. There is no doubt in my mind that The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, is easily the best film I've seen this year because it's the freaking Hobbit, man. I mean, there's like no comparison. This is Peter Jackson adapting Middle-earth on screen again, the second finale he has treated us to in two wonderful Middle-earth trilogies. And although it doesn't compare to the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it doesn't really compare to the finale that was The Return of the King, that doesn't matter because it doesn't change how absolutely fan-freaking-tastic this movie was. There was so much going on. I cried twice while watching the movie. It's just so powerful. That great music, the unbelievable characters, everything happening with Bilbo's, the end of Bilbo's journey, how his relationship with Thorin kind of comes to a head. Gandalf, Ian McKellen as Gandalf is wonderful as always. We were blessed to see him come back to this role one more time. Same with Orlando Bloom playing Legolas. There's some amazing set pieces. What's great is Orlando Bloom does get one more time to shine in an amazing action sequence in this film. He's the best, man. He is the biggest badass almost ever put on film. So Legolas is the man. I don't even know. I feel like the battle that happens here, the Five Armies battle, I have to say, and some may consider this blasphemy, but I'm going to stand by this. Even though Return of the King was a better film and a better conclusion to that trilogy, I feel like the Battle of the Five Armies was better than the Battle of Minas Tirith in The Lord of the Rings. And I say that as somebody who also feels the Battle of Helm's Deep was a better battle in the Lord of the Rings trilogy than the Battle at Minas Tirith, even though it was still a great battle, of course. There was so much chaos and action and carnage happening in this film, and there's a lot of loose ends that are all getting tied together with Thorin versus Azog. What happens with Thorin with the dragon sickness? What's Bilbo gonna do? What about Tauriel and Keely's weird relationship? How does that whole thing play out? What's going to happen with Legolas? What happens with Thranduil and the elves of the Woodland Realm? I mean, Jesus Christ, there's so much going on here, and it all has time to breathe. It all has its due time on the spotlight, and it's all delivered perfectly. They all come to great conclusions, and when you consider that a lot of this stuff, much to the chagrin of some people, including some of my friends, but the fact that a lot of this stuff was supplemental Middle-earth material that was pulled from other Tolkien works and infused into the Hobbit film story to make it work with The Lord of the Rings, that was a really hard thing to achieve, and only Peter Jackson could have pulled it off so well. It's got the best action of the series. It opens with that amazing conclusion to the Smaug, kind of battle scenario happening that we were left hanging with at the end of the Desolation of Smaug, and I loved what they did there. It was perfect. It didn't take up too much time. And they just did, they did everything right. I know that, a lot of people don't really love what's happening with The Hobbit, and I understand why. I understand your guys' complaints, I really do, but man, I just couldn't give two shits. It's The Hobbit, it's 3 Middle-earth movies, Peter Jackson made these movies, it's fucking awesome. The end, it's Middle-earth on screen from PJ himself, like the mastermind. We will never, I will say this right now, and in 100 years, you can compare my words. We will never see Middle-earth put on screen this way again. It will never feel this good. It will never look this good. It will never feel like an actual retelling of a real history the way Tolkien intended the books to be ever again. No one will ever do what Peter Jackson did. And the fact that he got to do it a second time, myself as a fan and as a film fan and just as a straight up nerd, I feel lucky, more than blessed that we got to see this happen again. Just like when we got the second Star Wars trilogy, and the fact that we're getting a third. Like, these are lucky, amazing times we live in, and we need to just look around and appreciate it, people. That's how I look at it. We should all feel lucky that Peter Jackson made 3 more films. Yes, it probably could have worked as just one movie. Or 2. 2 probably would have been just perfect. I definitely get that, and I agree. At the end of the day, could 2 films have been better than 3? Yeah, maybe. I do think that that's possible. But I don't want that to take away from how good the entire trilogy and all 3 films really were. I loved them all. They're all 3 masterpieces, just like the originals. Yes, the Lord of the Rings trilogy is far, far better of an adaptation. There's no doubt. But that's okay, man. That doesn't affect The Hobbit. And so, long story short, The Battle of the Five Armies, I knew was going to be my favorite movie of the year. It exceeded in spades. It's a wonderful movie. I've seen it twice already. I went to see it by myself on Christmas. That's how much I loved this film. And I loved it. I loved it again, and I cried again. It's so amazing. That scene, this isn't a spoiler, but the scene where, how do I say this without kind of spoiling it? Bilbo is holding an acorn, okay, if you know what I'm talking about. And he's speaking to Thorin during this scene. And the music, like the Lord of the Rings Hobbit kind of, Shire music comes in as he's talking about home. And it's one of the few moments where we see Thorin genuinely smile, and he has this fondness and appreciation and love for Bilbo in this moment in the midst of his darkness. Oh my gosh, I cried both times. I had tears in my eyes. It was so beautiful and an excellent representation of their relationship and an excellent portrayal of who Bilbo is, what it means to be a hobbit in this big crazy world, and why he thinks of and misses his home. And that's the ways of the Hobbit, man. That's the way hobbits are. And it was just delivered perfectly. So there you go, man. The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, the second Middle-earth conclusion that we never thought we'd have. Easily, without question, the best movie I saw this year. Okay, guys, and there you have it. Somehow this turned out to be the longest list video I've made yet. But when it comes to film, I have a lot to say. And although I don't talk about it as much on Rule of Two Review, make no mistake, I am just as big of a film fan as I am a gaming fan. So I'm really excited to be able to talk about these things when I have the opportunity. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Definitely can't wait to hear your thoughts. Of course, before ending, I do have to throw out a couple honorable mentions because there's a lot of films that almost made this list that I feel bad I couldn't talk about. The first one that I have to mention that almost made this list was Mockingjay Part 1 because I love the Hunger Games stuff, and the first two films are amazing. And Mockingjay Part 1 was also great, but not quite as great as the previous. And I did have it on the list at some point, but when a couple films like John Wick and The Signal and especially Whiplash randomly squeaked themselves onto the list last minute, that's when I had to cut Mockingjay. So I was really sorry to do that because I did really like it, even if it wasn't as good as the previous ones. Some other honorable mentions. Snowpiercer was amazing. Captain America, of course. I know everyone loves that film more than life itself, and I agree, it's amazing, but I found Guardians and X-Men to be better comic book films, so I included those on my list. What else? Transformers: Age of Extinction. Yes, I freaking love that movie. I don't care what you haters say. 300: Rise of an Empire was amazing. Divergent was this year. Loved it to death. The new Muppets film. The Raid 2, badass. Fury was amazing. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, great. And of course, the Angry Video Game Nerd movie, which apparently I'm the only one that liked that movie because everyone keeps shitting on it in the comments on my review of it. But fuck all those people, man. I loved it. AVGN's amazing. James Rolfe is amazing, and the movie kicks ass. So those were all of the immediate honorable mentions that I could think of to bring up. So, that's over 20 films I've talked about today. So it was a really great year for film. 2014 rocked. Tons of wonderful movies. We got, another Lord of the Middle-earth conclusion. We got the third Hobbit film. We got a new X-Men film, Captain America, Guardians of the Galaxy, some surprises, a brand new Wes Anderson film. Keanu Reeves comes back to form. It was a great year, man. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. There you go. My 10 favorite films for 2014. Of course, my list will differ from your list, so I very much want to hear from you guys in the comments below. Talk about your favorite films. What did you think of my list? What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? What films that I loved did you actually hate? That stuff's always going to happen. So I want to hear, what it is you guys thought of this year and what you thought of my list. So thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to Rule of Two Review if you already haven't. Follow the links below to the Facebook page and the Twitter. And thanks for watching as always, and I will catch you guys next time on another video from Rule of Two Review.